Hey guys, welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. So I positioned myself this way so you could see what I've been working on. Everybody keeps asking me, what have you been up to these days? And I tell them, shoveling rock. And then they kind of chuckle at first, and then they look at me and they're like, wait, are you serious? Yes, I've been shoveling rock. That's what I've been doing. You see we've got a rock wall that I built back there that's all backfilled with crusher run. We're working on some pads up in here. We've hosted some things for some of the rural youth development groups that we've worked with over the years, some campfires and stuff. We're just kind of building out some better pads and making it a little bit of a nicer space. And then obviously when you turn around, you see the pastures that are normally my backdrop. So today, giving you a little bit of an inside look into what I've been working on. So I wanted to talk about something. The U.S. government is designated up to 31 million acres for utility-grade solar panel installations. This is all part of the Biden administration's green energy infrastructure build. And some of you, if you've watched my videos in the past, you've watched a video that I put out where the Department of Energy is allowing up to 100 million for these massive energy transmission lines to run across our country.
The federal government can claim federal eminent domain and take our property from us.
That is a farmer in Russell County, and here's his concern: a proposed energy corridor. It is up to 5 miles wide, making room for massive power lines throughout the nation.
The Federal Power Act, which dates back to 1920, created the Federal Power Commission, now known as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This commission has the power to take land via eminent domain for the purposes of distributing energy across our country. This is how we have power lines. This is how we get oil pipelines drenched across the country. And many people have protested this for years. Native Americans have protested these pipelines going across their territories for years, but nobody has ever been able to do anything about it. The government says, hey, we want your land, it's for the public good, and we can take it. It might surprise you to know that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has plans to build out a green energy infrastructure across as much as 103 million acres across the United States. That's a lot of land. Let me break it down for you. The plan includes 10 corridors. There's the Delta Plains corridor, which is going to be 4 to 18 miles wide, 645 miles long. So simple math, 2,580 square miles to 11,610 square miles. That's a maximum of 7.5 million acres. The Mid-Atlantic, 2 miles wide, 180 miles long. That's about 360 square miles or 230,400 acres. The Mid-Atlantic Canada, which is just 1 mile wide and 42 miles long, is 42 square miles, 26,880 acres. Midwest Plains, which is 5 miles wide, 780 miles long, so 3,900 square miles, 2.5 million acres. The Northwest, which is 0.3 miles wide and 515 miles long. I mean, this is really just a typical power line. It's 154.5 square miles, just under 99,000 acres. Mountain Plains Southwest, 10 to 100 miles wide, 540 miles long. That's about 5,400 to 54,000 square miles, 3.5 to 35 million acres. New York Mid-Atlantic, which is 4 miles wide, 12 miles long, 48 square miles, 30,000, almost 31,000 acres. New York, New England, which is 1 mile wide, 60 miles long, 60 square miles, so a little over 38,000 acres. Northern Plains, 10 to 50 miles wide, 300 miles east to west, 400 miles north to south. That's 7,000 to 35,000 square miles, 4.5 million to 22.4 million acres. The Plains Southwest, 5 to 100 miles wide, 345 miles east to west, 220 miles north to south, anywhere between 2,825 to 56,500 square miles, 1.8 million to 35.9 million acres is what it would take to build that. So the total of this massive vision of the United States government is about anywhere between 23,000, which is, if they just did narrow strips, to some of these big strips that they want, 161,000 or almost 162,000 square miles. That's up to 103.2 million acres of land.
And you've had cases across the country. People don't connect the dots, but there have been cases across the country of eminent domain, largely impacting farmers, large landowners, where these energy companies are coming in and taking large swaths of land for this new energy corridor. And if people don't want to sell or don't want to give them, a right of way, they basically just take the land and pay them whatever they feel it's worth, because the government is really kind of the ones working on this project with them. And you guys tell me whether you think that this is some sort of eminent domain case or if it's to make large corporations more profitable. But these energy transmission lines will take up to 100 million acres, and that's because in some cases they're as wide as 200 miles, so you have these 70-mile wide swaths. One's going through Maryland. There are a lot of Maryland farmers fighting eminent domain there. There's stuff up in Michigan going into Canada. You've got farmers again arguing eminent domain cases there. You've heard about Missouri and Kansas. This will go all the way down into Texas, Nevada. All of these places are these massive energy transmission lines. And I think you have to look at the overall picture here to understand how this works. But you have these mega regions where they want to consolidate the population across the United States. And then you have these massive energy transmission lines that will transmit energy to these areas. But it's not just the energy that we're used to having, it's green energy. And so I said in that video, they're going to need more land to install these solar and wind turbines in order to be able to produce the energy that they want to feed into this grid. The BLM, which is the Bureau of Land Management, has recently upgraded its Western Solar Plan. And in their original plan, they were going to allow solar developers to apply for leases within 10 miles of these massive corridors. And what they've done recently is they've expanded that up to 15 miles within these corridors that these companies can come in and take over leases. I think you'll end up seeing cases of eminent domain as this moves forward too, as they need more land for solar energy, more land for wind turbines. But this is just the BLM lands that they're talking about right now. And so they're allowing solar developers to come within 15 miles of these massive transmission corridors, and it comes out to about 31 million acres that they would like to allocate to utility solar production. So that is, if you look in total, that's 13% of BLM land. And BLM has thrown a lot of land into conservation as well. So a lot of these big energy companies can buy up land or lease up land for conservation purposes and just put it to rest. So you've had, I don't even know, millions of acres over the past year that BLM has transitioned into this conservation use or eligible for conservation use. We recently saw up in Oregon where they had transitioned millions of acres into conservation use, and under that agreement, it was basically the degradation to the land that would push it into conservation didn't have to come from ranching itself. It could have come from other factors, and then the next thing you know, half the state is on fire from fires that were lit on purpose along some roads right through cattle country. And what we may end up seeing, because it would take years for that land to recover for cows to graze on it under the current BLM rules, you may actually see a lot of that land be pushed into conservation because the BLM also allotted a lot of that land to be potentially used for conservation in the future. So a lot of this is moving forward fairly quickly, but this 31 million acres actually crosses over at least the ideal plan that the BLM has put forward, what they would like to go with, would show a crossover of about 19 million acres of current grazing leases. 19 million acres of grazing leases could be swapped out for utility solar development projects. So let's talk about this, but real quick. UNASA TV is supported through its own store, UNASA Trading Company. In reference to today's video, we're offering 10% off when you pre-order a Defend the Right to Farm leather patch hat, which you've seen me wear on this channel numerous times. We're gonna do the hat a little differently. We're getting the hats from a different source. This will be the Richardson hat. It will be the one that you see here in the picture. And you'll get 10% off that hat if you order a Defend the Right to Ranch, Protect Our Rangelands t-shirt to go with it. You'll get 10% off both items. So the new shirt design comes in multiple color options. You know, let's get everyone on board with this Defend the Right to Farm and Ranch movement. And you can show your support by buying these t-shirts, buying these hats, wearing them, letting people know. And it's amazing to me, you know, when I wear my shirts around, people are like, do you really have to defend the right to farm? Do you have to defend the right to ranch? I mean, that seems crazy to me. And the answer is yes. In today's society, you absolutely. We are losing those rights left and right. We're seeing ranchers being taken advantage of by government agencies. And now we're seeing a lot of our public lands, which have been traditionally used for grazing, being turned over for solar projects. And I'm gonna get in a little bit to why we need all this power, and it will blow your mind what they're actually doing here. But the point is we are losing a lot of ground every year. We always have to developers, and now we're losing it to power companies. And really, you know, what's feeding all this is big tech. You know, there was an interesting study, I'm gonna share this with you real quick, about, you know, when we're talking about green energy, sequestering carbon, and doing all of these things, there was a really interesting study that came out of Florida. And this is the Florida's Buck Island Ranch, which is run by Archibald Biological Station. And basically they've used this ranch over the years to study the different impacts of grazing and cattle on our environment, you know, our waterways. They've done a lot of different research studies. And with everybody talking about carbon and methane pollution from cows and all these things, they did an in-depth study of the pastures that their cows were grazing on versus pastures that their cows weren't grazing on. And even with the methane and CO2 that came from the cows while they were grazing, they had less emissions coming from the grazed lands than coming from the lands that were left to rest. And the reason for that is because this is a simple fact, okay? When cows are consuming all this grass and all this biomass that we have out in our fields, they're breaking that down in their stomach with the rumens, and the gases that are coming off of it are coming off of the grasses that they're eating. So if you don't have that animal to consume it, and they're consuming a lot of carbon with that, they're repurposing a lot of that, they're turning it into meat and food for us. For when you don't have anything grazing on it, it breaks down on the surface, and you actually have a significant amount of methane that comes out of wetter grasslands. You have a significant amount of carbon that respirates from these grasslands, and they don't break down properly either. You know, when a cow constantly munches on the grass, it causes that plant to continue to grow. With the overgrazing, it often causes the roots to extend deeper in the soil. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to any of you that sequesters more carbon than letting a field rest. We've had desertification in a lot of our national parks from areas where the ruminants had been removed. A lot of them have been hunted off, you know, bison, elk, etc. But without having those animals, we actually have the opposite impact. We have deforestation, we have land degradation. And so when we're talking about our public lands and the best way to manage them, without having those grazing animals on those lands, we are looking at environmental degradation. And you can put as many solar panels out there as you want to, and you could grade as much of that land as you want to put these solar panels in place, disrupt the surface of the soil, and you're just making it worse, right? I don't think that there's a good environmental offset from putting utility sized, you know, solar power grids out on grazing land. It makes absolutely no sense when it comes to the environment. They're not doing this for the environment. And I think every environmentalist needs to open their eyes and see that. And I doubt many of these environmentalists out there who wanted this stuff ever dreamed of the fact that they would be driving across the United States of America, seeing these massive power line corridors stretching for over 100 miles in several locations, up to 70 miles in some of the smaller locations. And then beyond those, these massive fields of graded land where they've installed these huge solar panel, utility grade solar panel installations to feed into this power system. I doubt there are many environmentalists out there who will look at this situation and say, yes, that's what I envisioned in a greener world. And if that's what they envisioned, I'm sorry, but you and I have a very different perspective on what is a nice environment. So this isn't just happening out west, by the way. You know, these power transmission lines and things like that are happening all across the United States. You've heard me talk about data centers going in and them actually reallocating water rights from farmland to help produce these massive data centers. A lot of people think that the data centers themselves are just coming from Meta, which is Facebook, or Google or Microsoft. They're the ones that need all these big data centers. But it's also the government that is installing a lot of these data centers. In fact, the state of Virginia has been dubbed the spy state because of how many data centers the US government is putting into Virginia alone. And what we're seeing because of all of this is we're seeing this need for a massive infrastructure upgrade, because these data centers require a significant amount of energy. When you Google search something, when you Google search a word, it takes very little amount of energy for Google to pull up some search results. When you use ChatGPT or one of those services where it comes out with, a scripted answer, maybe even writes a paper for you, draws a picture for you, whatever it is. I've used it before and I think it's kind of stupid, but that's because I can think for myself. But if you are one of those people who have to use this artificial intelligence to be able to get these pre-scripted answers, it actually uses 400 to 500 times the energy to produce that AI answer than it does to just give you an answer off of a search engine like what we have done historically. And these data centers, they're collecting all this information, they're building this artificial intelligence technology, and they require a substantial amount of energy and a substantial amount of water to operate. We already have water restrictions across the United States when it comes to agriculture. So putting in these data centers is almost certainly going to curb water use from agriculture. They have to do it. We also are at a disadvantage when it comes to energy. Even if we went with coal, even if we went with oil, we'd have to increase our energy supply from other sources in order to feed the amount of energy that these data centers require. I mean, you're talking 400 to 500% the requirement of energy for research and whatever else you've been doing on your devices than what we have done in the past. So this has more to do with what we call the fourth industrial revolution than it has anything to do with the environment, because there's always a trade-off when it comes to creating energy. Okay, there's always a trade-off. These solar panels, I mean, this isn't even sustainable. If you think about how much energy they need for the fourth industrial revolution, it is absolutely unsustainable. They're using rare earth minerals, they're using all these different things that they have to mine for, and there's just not enough of it out there to create all this infrastructure that they want to have. So they're never, ever, ever going to do away with fossil fuels. That was never the intent. The intent is to increase investment into additional energy to be able to build out this massive infrastructure. And what are you going to do when you use up all of those resources and things start to go bad, where you're going to get your replacement solar panels? We don't even have a way of recycling a lot of this stuff yet. These batteries that we're putting in people's cars, we're using slaves to pull the lithium out of the ground and the cobalt. What do you do with those batteries when they go bad, right? So as you listen to this video, I want you to think about, at what point does progress go too far? At what point does our own progress end up handicapping us? Because at the rate we're going, by taking rangeland, turning it over to solar power producers, by taking water rights from farmers, turning it over to cobalt mines, turning it over to data centers. At the rate we're going, we're going to starve each other out. And I realize they're already working on lab-grown food. We've got some options out there. The FDA's approved a couple things, but you know, are you really going to eat lab-grown food? Are you really going to eat bugs? Do you want your kids to live that type of lifestyle? Do you really think it's going to be better for you? The other thing, the big problem I have with all of this data and information age is that, you know, we're in the process right now. The US dollar is toast, right? So they're moving towards these digital currencies. Those digital currencies also require a lot of these data centers to track all of, you know, this crypto dollars moving around. And we've seen the amount of energy that cryptocurrency creates. Just imagine when the entire United States goes into digital currency, when an entire country moves to a digital currency, how much data, how much information, how much power and energy it's going to cause or require in order for us to set up one of those systems. But we almost have to at this point, because US dollar, like I said, is toast. We have to move to something else, and I'll explain to where we're moving in a minute. But you've got all of this technology that requires all of this energy. You have these digital currencies coming out. The Department of Transportation, if you watched my video last week, I talked about what they're doing with the Y2X or V2X technology, where they're basically having everything on the roadways communicate with one another. They want a pedestrian's phone, if they're walking near a roadway, to be alerting a car driving down the road that they're there. They want all of these things to actually come together by 2036 for 75% of the country's road systems have, and about 20 models from each manufacturer can adapt to this new information technology roadway, which is going to track every movement, everywhere you drive, everywhere you go. All of this requires a substantial amount of energy, and it is not sustainable. There's just no way it's sustainable. When people say that setting up solar panels and collecting energy from the sun is renewable and sustainable, they're not telling you about the fact that these parts break down. There's no way to really fully recycle them. There's no way to get those minerals back once we've mined all the rare earth metals that we possibly can to build these things. This fourth industrial revolution is coming at us so fast, it is sending us down this dark road, and before we know it, we're gonna be there. We're already seeing it across the country. People are asking me, why aren't people talking about all of these eminent domain cases across the country? And it's because somebody in Michigan fighting a power line company doesn't realize that the same guy fighting a power line company in Maryland, the same guy in Kansas fighting a power line, the same guy in Missouri, the same guy in Nevada, that they're all connected to the same infrastructure that's being implemented by the United States government. They just don't see the big picture. Most people don't see the big picture. Most people only see what's right in front of them. That's been a problem in our country for a long time. But this is all happening not just here in the United States, it's happening globally. Now, I mentioned that the currency system is failing and all that is failing. The next big energy producer that I see, and I'm going to do a separate video specifically on this, but they have this carbon capture and sequester goal around the world. And you have these direct-to-air carbon capture machines that literally suck carbon out of the air, store it in a brick or whatever, and then store it underground. Those are the new money printing machines. Carbon is going to be the new currency of the world. If you look at different bills, like the Inflation Reduction Act here in the United States, it immediately went into ways of monetizing carbon. The way that they monetize carbon is they tax those who are carbon emitters, and then they credit those who are carbon sequesters. So you get a certain checks and balances for everything that you do. You know, if you have cows on your property, even though they should be credits for sequestering carbon properly, you would probably get debited because they fart methane. Let's say you drive your car and they're tracking everywhere your car goes, everywhere that you go, everything that you're doing. They say, oh, well, that route took you a little longer. You took the scenic route instead of the shortest route. So we're gonna tack on an extra tax for you there. We're gonna tax you on X, Y, and Z. And eventually you're gonna move this entire currency system over to a carbon credit system that has unlimited possibilities. Especially, that's why these big corporations are already investing billions of dollars into these carbon sequestering projects. And like I said, I'll do a whole other video on it, but those direct-to-air carbon sequestering machines, they also require a substantial amount of energy, and yet we're going to start seeing these things roll out across the United States in the near future. Anyway, I kind of got a little off subject there, but I mean, think about it. 13% of the public lands, it's the land that you and I own, is going to go to private solar companies to figure out how to generate this green energy and feed our grids. And the problem is we only probably need about 1 million acres to actually go towards feeding our electric grids for our current needs. The reason why we have 31 million acres set aside is because they want to produce enough energy for this new fourth industrial revolution, which is just going to roll out all of these projects. And they all have these 2030, 2036 timelines, deadlines, where they would like to be at this new state with artificial intelligence. This is supposed to be our future, and it's rolling out extremely fast. It is probably going to be one of the fastest revolutions that we have seen, faster than the Industrial Revolution, faster than anything else that we've seen as mankind. And yet it's the most dangerous. It's the most dangerous because it is causing us to not just increase our energy consumption twofold, but by 4 or 5-fold within a very short period of time. That's insane. That's a lot. And like I said, I've grown up studying science. I've grown up studying, our environment, our climate, all of these things. And if there's one thing I can honestly say about it all, is that every source of energy comes at a cost. Like, the best thing we can do is to reduce our energy consumption, have a diverse portfolio of where that energy is coming from. The worst thing we can do is consolidate into one type of energy infrastructure. And like I said, I don't think they're actually going to do that here. They never will. They'll never do away with fossil fuels. If they did away with fossil fuels, they'd have to do away with a whole lot of other things. If you think about, the byproducts of fossil fuels, what they all create. I mean, they create solar panels themselves. So we can't completely do away with fossil fuels. That is a vision that's been sold on people. That's a complete lie. The only reason why we need to increase our energy to the extent that we're increasing it is to feed this new revolution. The big tech companies need this in order to achieve what they want to achieve. The US government, for surveillance purposes, needs all of this so that they can achieve what they want to achieve with artificial intelligence. This will dramatically change our lives in our country. It already is, between now and 2030. That's not that far away. But like I said, at what point in time has progress gone too far? At what point of time is progressing in a certain direction, especially when you're moving as quickly as we are? At what point of time does it become dangerous or detrimental to society? If it becomes detrimental, wouldn't that be anti-progress? I mean, there have been a lot of ideas we've had in the past that we didn't follow through with because they were bad ideas. And worst of all, I think if we let this continue, we're going to lose, rangeland, farming, ranching. It's more than just our food supply. It's culture, it's tradition, it's values, it's family, it's legacy. There's so much behind, the agrarian lifestyle here in the United States. And we're allowing our government to make these deals with these private energy corporations, private data corporations, private big tech companies in order to literally take land from families that have had it in generations and do what they want to with it to become more profitable. Because that's what it comes down to, is more and more profit. If we've tanked our own financial system, if we've maxed it out by just constantly printing money, what's the next best thing we could do? Well, we can monetize carbon. Anyway, guys, I hope you have a good week, and remember to defend the right to farm and join our movement by buying some of these t-shirts and hats. Like I said, the hats are on pre-sale right now. As soon as we get enough sold, we'll go ahead and place the order and get those sent out to you guys. And like I said, if you order the hat and the new Defend the Right to Ranch t-shirt, you get 10% off both items. See you in a few days.